Do I have hyperventilation syndrome? And is it perhaps the thing that's causing a lot of the symptoms that I might label as anxiety, panic, overwhelm, or stress? Today, in this video, we're really going to discuss what I see to be one of the most overlooked causes of what a lot of people call anxiety. And we're really going to look at the physiological basis. Now, who am I? Well, my name's Campbell. I'm a physiotherapist, I'm a breathwork specialist, and I'm really passionate about teaching people about how their body works. Right. And this video, we're going to explore how breathing could be the thing that's creating a lot of the symptoms that we might call anxiety, stress, or overwhelm. So, what is hyperventilation syndrome, and how do I know if I have it? Well, hyperventilation, simply put, is breathing more than you need to, right? Most people will recognize the kind of acute hyperventilation that we associate with, for example, a panic attack, right? But that's not what we're talking about today, right? Hyperventilation can be occurring in the background all of the time, and it can be dysregulating my nervous system, my physiology, my mood, my emotions. And today I want to teach you really how to identify if it is something that's contributing to your state and what you can do about it. But let's start with, why does it happen, right? The fact that emotional stress can induce excessive respiratory response, right? Said another way, I feel stressed and it changes my breathing, is likely rooted in the evolutionary, fight or flight system, where the anticipation of an imminent need for exertion, i.e., I might need to run away from the tiger, right? That causes an increase in our breathing, because when I increase my breathing, I make more energy available. But now we don't run from the tiger, right? And we can't run from our boss or our kids or our relationship or the traffic or social media. So this increase in ventilation is not met with an increase in physical exertion, right? And what that causes is this disruption of my chemistry, right? When we're breathing too much, it induces what's called hypocapnia, which just means low carbon dioxide. Respiratory alkalosis, my blood is moving into an alkaline state. And although there's a lot of talk about alkaline diets and alkaline water, that's not always a good thing. And it also can create, a array of complex physiological changes, one of which is vasoconstriction, particularly to the brain, right? And what that means is I reduce blood flow to my brain. So that feeling of I can't quite make a decision, I can't focus, I can't pay attention, might be rooted in the fact that you're breathing out too much carbon dioxide, you're closing down your blood vessels, and you're not delivering oxygen to the brain, right? And we can all understand how that might impair my ability to have a stable mood, right? To pay attention to the right things, to shift my mindset, to have agency over how I'm feeling. So, what do I look for, right? Chronic, recurrent, hyperventilation is not obvious. For a lot of people, what it might look like is frequent sighing, right? Frequent deep breath. If you catch yourself taking these big breaths all the time, that's a sign that my body is trying to offload carbon dioxide. Because if I'm over breathing all the time, I get quite sensitive to these increases in CO2. And so if you frequently sigh, then that might be a way for you to understand, maybe my body's trying to get rid of CO2. And that's not a good thing. The other thing we'll often see is the respiratory pattern. If I'm breathing up into the chest and the shoulders rather than down into the lower part of the lungs and the rib cage, if I'm taking shallow breaths, right? If I'm feeling like my breath is a little bit chaotic, it stops, it starts, it's fast, it's slow. All these things can be signs of this kind of chronic hyperventilation. But we also want to kind of combine, the breathing side of things with the non-breathing side of things, right? People that experience dizziness, right? Rapid heartbeat, trembling or shaking, sweating, right? Heart palpitations, high blood pressure, feeling short of breath. These can all be triggered by hyperventilation and caused by this change in my breathing and chemistry. And finally, the things that have got nothing to do with breathing, or that we assume don't, right? Emotional reactivity. I get snappy. I find it hard to switch off. My energy's all over the place. Again, these can be signs that my breathing is dysregulated. So, what can you do to kind of test and check? Do I have hyperventilation syndrome? Right. One of the things we can look at, is, well, how many times a minute do you breathe? There's a simple assessment I'll link to in the show notes that you can just measure how many breaths do I take in a minute. And if that number is, 15 and above, we can be pretty sure that we're hyperventilating, right? We can also measure our tolerance to carbon dioxide. Again, I'll link to this in the show, in the notes, right? To show us how tolerant am I of this gas that I'm breathing out all the time. But then also asking yourself about your sleep quality, your emotional reactivity, your energy management, right? Do I frequently sigh? Do I breathe up into my chest? Do I feel stressed, dizzy, light-headed, short of breath? Like all of these symptoms can come together to give us this big picture. Now, one thing that you can do to test, and I don't recommend, doing this too intensely, but if you'd like to kind of check in and notice, does my breathing impact my symptoms? I'd encourage you to find, a safe spot. So sitting down on the floor or even laying down, right, where you're comfortable, and start to breathe deep and fast for about a minute, right? Taking these big, fast breaths and see what happens. If you start to feel the symptoms that you feel and that you call anxiety, well, then we can be pretty sure that breathing is contributing to those feelings. Again, I don't want you to do this standing up, driving a car, right? You can get dizzy, you can get lightheaded, you can pass out, right? But this is a way that I can test, does my breathing impact the way that I feel? And so if you feel yourself getting lightheaded, dizzy, anxious, heart racing, right? Or anything that you term, right, familiar as the symptoms that you might experience at other times throughout the day when you're feeling stressed or worried, then we know breathing is a contributing factor, right? So what do we do about that? Well, we want to learn how to control and suppress the symptoms of hyperventilation. And we can assess that by first triggering it intentionally with rapid breathing, and then also eliminating it with breath holding, right? So when I hold the breath, I retain the carbon dioxide. When I breathe rapidly, I breathe out the carbon dioxide. And that is impacting my physiology, right? So you can test, do I have hyperventilation syndrome by measuring your respiratory rate, your carbon dioxide tolerance, and then by doing this provocation test, right? Breathe deep and rapid for a minute and see what happens. And then we can actually learn, well, how can I control those symptoms? And a big tool that you can use is breath regulation, whether that's breath holding, slow rhythmical breathing, a timed breath pattern, for example, in 4, out 6. These are going to give you actionable tools that you can use when you're feeling stressed, when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're feeling anxious, right? And so there's a really wide variety of people whose symptoms manifest, right, from their physiology, from their breathing, or at least it's being contributed to by their breathing, right? But they're rarely given the tools to address this, right? We're labeled, well, that's anxiety, that's, some other symptom, and here's the medication, or here's what you can do. You have to change that environment or quit your job, right? If it's physiology, you can change your physiology. So I hope this video perhaps shines a bit of light on, something that I see is really common, but not commonly talked about. If you found it helpful, then I'd encourage you to subscribe and maybe leave a comment below. If you tried that test and you found something happen, what happened? And if you want further strategies, there's videos on this channel, right, discussing how to optimize your breathing, how to take back control of your breath, and use it as a tool to improve your health.